Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. She is Alec Twinley. I am Ian Hest. Austin Robillard heading on a bird up to the Pacific Northwest, or close to, I guess, as the Herons get ready to take on the San Jose Earthquakes in San Jose for the very first time in the young life of Inter Miami football. A very important game, Alex, as we want to look at what will wind up being a very important week, maybe a season-defining week for Inter Miami at San Jose, then at Montreal coming up this weekend. Let's start, though, by looking back, because it almost is a bigger week now because of what happened last weekend, one of the wildest games that you could have imagined. Inter Miami drawing 4-4 against FC Cincinnati. They were up 1-0. Cincinnati tied at 1-1. They were up 2-1. Cincinnati tied at 2-2. They were up 3-2. Cincinnati came back to tie it and take the lead at the very end before Chris McVey scored an amazing goal, nominated for MLS Goal of the Week. So, but definitely giving up a lot of opportunities. A game I think that we both agree they dominated for the most part. But really, a lackluster defense is the story of this. So I wanted us to put a bow on that, because it'll wind up becoming very big and very important in the next couple of games. This defense looks, I don't know if out of sorts would be the right word or the right term, but it does look like it lacks a focus, like it lacks a purpose and a formidable nature to it that really would inspire perhaps a clean sheet. Maybe we're even going too far with that.
Yeah, they looked really out of sorts, kind of slow at times. Transition defense was not there the other night. Yeah, I think it was Neville trying to be a bit more attack minded, and while doing that, he left the defensive half exposed, because usually Miami never gives up goals like that, especially that last Brandon Vasquez one where he just kind of split the two, the center back and fullback, which is Sam McVay, and snuck in and got a goal. So honestly, it was out of the ordinary for Miami, but yeah, it's not good. 4 goals given up when defense has been preached all season is not ideal.
So just looking at it, they allowed 7 shots on goal. It's tough to imagine ever getting a result when you allow that many. 15 shots taken, and some of them, I think back to a couple of goals. They were simply just lax in focus and comfortability. The fourth one, especially, how you get beat on the touchline right there. Yedlin just really lost it, and we were joking after the game that I don't know if joking is the right word, but thinking about it, was he probably saved 3 goals with how quickly he was moving throughout the pitch, recovering a lot of the mistakes that others were making, and yet also probably gave up 2 goals as well.
Yeah, and I think this just shows that Miami needs to go out and get another left back or something. McVay, against NYCFC, he looked far more comfortable as a center back than he did, overlapping runs as a fullback. So I think, if Noah Allen isn't ready and Kieran Gibbs is, he was left off the 18 because of a coach's decision. Clearly, he's not being too rated right now. Or maybe Neville just went with a more attacking lineup. But then again, Jovan Jones was on the bench, and he could have played as a fullback. So, yeah, I think Miami this offseason needs to maybe go and trade for an MLS caliber starting left back, and then have McVay slide over to set his natural position. And then, sorry, my nephew's in the background again. And then have McVay slide over to his more natural position and have him play alongside Damian Lowe.
We love your nephew's contribution as always, and probably, resembles a lot of feelings about how the defense wins on Saturday. I guess my thought is, in the short term, what could be fixed? You bring up a great point that maybe they need to in the offseason go and address some of these things. But right now is in the moment, and they have an opportunity to hopefully, let's see, make a playoff run here. you're going to have to patch this up somehow. What are some options? Because looking at it, I don't really, it feels like they played their hand, and this is just hoping for the best.
I don't know. I think maybe you should get maybe Mambika back in there. Ryan Sandler, he's done a lot of good and he's developing, but he's still only a rookie. And Mambika has MLS experience from last season, and he's played a full year with Fort Lauderdale CF the season last season as well. So I think getting Mambika back in, fully fit. We saw with him and Lowe together, they made a really good pairing. Especially against Seattle, where their starters came on and they started peppering the back line and they headed away everything. So maybe you should bring up Mabika back in there. Maybe you can start Jovan Jones at left back and slide McVay over. There are several different things that they could do. Maybe tweak the tactics a little where maybe it's not too open at the back. Maybe have Gregory slide in between the two center backs to create a bit of a back three, so there's more defensive stability there. Then the front attacking six can go and do their thing. They're attacking five. There are plenty of options that they could potentially do. So,
well, I'm just thinking about it because Phil talked about possibly in that second half going back to the back three center backs and sliding McVay in. Ultimately, it didn't wind up, I don't know, really functioning that way for an extended period of time. It was a little weird when they had announced the lineup right off the bat. We were all looking at it and scratching our heads that the lineup initially didn't seem to make sense with Robert Taylor playing like a left wing back. And it was really shown as a bizarre lineup, but it wound up functioning when it was working, especially in the first half, as a 4-2-3-1, just a standard thing. Would going to that back, I don't know if that back three resolves it, especially if you don't have like a Gibbs on the wing or Noah Allen on the wing, because I don't really see anybody else able to function in that wing back role. And that back three really operates as a back five with Gregory basically making it a back six, or Jean Mota, as we've mentioned before, falling maybe a little further back than even Gregory does. So I wonder if that is too defensive and you're giving up everything. They were scoring and had possession at will throughout that Cincinnati game. It felt like, but throughout all of it, they were only ever up one. They never extended that lead. There were a couple times, especially right at the start of the second half, where it could have been 4-2, and then maybe you're able to have a little breathing room to be able to do that. But it was a one-goal game the entire time, and I think that speaks to getting a little bit of your hands tied in what you can mix and match defensively. Most of the named bench were attacking players, pretty much all the attacking options that Inter Miami had. And most of them were brought on. I think only Emerson was the main attacker that wasn't brought on. And so, pretty much they unloaded an attack and you sort of reap what you sow when you do that, and you get a 4-4 game like you saw on Saturday.
Yeah, maybe. I think Neville will probably try to address that against San Jose. San Jose isn't the best team, so maybe he'll more lean towards maybe some tactical shifts against them. So yeah, we just have to wait and see. Really, I think that would be probably the ideal game to do, play a back three if you want. With Gonzalo confirmed starting per Michelle Kaufman from the Miami Herald. Yeah, I think maybe you go with the back three, have two attacking midfielders behind Gonzalo, one being Pozuelo, maybe Bryce Duke. Midfield two can be Gregory and Mata, and then wing backs, Robert Taylor, maybe, I don't know, Yendlin. I know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that you necessarily can play that way as long as Taylor's going to be that. And that's not any knock on him. That's not to say that he can't do it. It's to say that it's not ideal.
Or you can play Robert Taylor as an attacking midfielder next to Pozuelo and then have Kieran Gibbs as the wing back or Jovan Jones. Or
right. There's your option. I think that's the only real way that works.
And I think that will play well too, honestly.
But they do come back. They get that Christopher McVay goal, which I think officially was recorded as 90 plus 7, 90 plus 6. Right in there. That's the 6th goal that Inter Miami has scored from the 87th minute or later this year. So
crazy.
Which is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, we think to the last maybe quarter of an hour, the last 10 minutes or whatever. This is literally at the very last kick of the ball that they've been doing it. They've gained 9 points throughout the course of the season by scoring all those late goals. And I look at that and really say, if you don't score that goal, the season is really on thin ice. They got very, very lucky. We'll get into it in a little bit with some of the other results against their Eastern Conference rivals. But if you lose that game, you really are digging yourself a hole. Like grabbing a draw, you're still holding on to the lifeboat, and still have the opportunity there. Just the importance of that goal. McVay spoke about it on Monday, and really just keeping Inter Miami holding on. It's sort of like we're kicking this can down the road, and something's going to have to give eventually.
Yeah, and yeah, they can't continue to do this. I think that first half goal, those first half goals that Gonzalo scored were the first time Miami scored in the first half since I think the Portland game.
It was Portland on May 28th.
Yeah, that was a couple of months ago. So
We're into August now.
Yeah, it wasn't really. It's not really good to see that, and I know people have been getting on Neville, and I think we have with some of the just decisions they've been making, but I think they know that it's crunch time and they'll get it together.
We haven't gotten yet to the MLS Player of the Week. Gonzalo Higuain scores his first hat trick for Inter Miami, and really the first one. What a goal! Also nominated for Goal of the Week. So Miami has 2 nominees for Goal of the Week this week. We'll see if they split the vote. I think that it might hurt them
Yeah,
because
honestly.
of that, because you can't decide which one's better.
Yeah.
Maybe Miami fans need to coalesce around one of those 2 goals, just to fend off the other options. But what a strike off a free kick for Gonzalo. Scores the next goal from the run of play, which was nice to see, his 3rd of the season from the run of play. And then also his 3rd penalty right before the end of the first half. His first hat trick in a Inter Miami jersey. And Phil had said earlier this week that this is the happiest he's seen Gonzalo. We say that with a chuckle because Gonzalo being happy, it looks a little different maybe than most of us being happy.
Yeah.
And he, when talking with him after the game on Saturday, he certainly did not seem happy. Very frustrated coming out of there with a draw, game I think that he really felt they should have won. This resurgence from him, though, has to be at least a little bit inspiring in the short term. And we can get to the long term in a sec. But for the immediate reaction to it, if a player of his quality is performing in this short 4-game stretch that he's had here, it really can be a role model to the others to say, hey, it's playoff time. It's getting down to it. Your best players need to play. Bill's talked about that all the time. This team, for wherever it is, its designated players are not its best players. And that's really tough to win in this league. So to have your designated player performing like this, and now with Pozuelo, you've sort of solved that, and he gets his first assist. Now you're starting to get your designated players involved. You see the difference immediately.
Yeah, and I think that's only a big, it's a huge plus for Miami, especially, Gonzalo's hitting his form now, and Pozuelo's starting to settle down a bit. Gonzalo plays better with a natural 10. You saw it with his brother last season, Federico, who retired, who is a more natural 10. Yeah, and I think, Gonzalo's form is starting to, there is some questions about, could he return next season, or whatnot. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know
let's talk about it. Let's talk about what
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about what you do next season, because I think that there is starting to be a lot of chatter about it, and we'll see, what happens come then. For me, it's really simple. It's that you bring him back if the price is right. I don't think that we live in a world where he could be a designated player again. I could be wrong on that. I definitely have been wrong before. But for Gonzalo to be a designated player, I guess I think would really take a lot of you're sacrificing a lot in other places that I don't really think you'd be able to overcome uh, in terms of just structuring this roster in terms of composing its parts. He's not getting any younger, and I think that that really changes how you
Yeah,
possibly
he's
could.
turning 35, I
Yeah,
think. Mm.
and
So
so what I guess what I'm to make that long story short is like, yes, he can come back, or yes, maybe you take him back, but not at a designated player. You need someone who's able to play 25, 30 games. And Gonzalo, if you're asking a lot to ask him to do multiple weeks playing 90, two
yeah.
game weeks pretty much out of the question for him. You're already managing that. I think right there is where it would truly lie.
Yeah, and I've gotten a couple of comments on Twitter saying that, we should bring the club should bring Gonzalo back, but maybe on a lesser deal. I think if he's a DP, that honestly it just severely limits what Miami's able to do roster wise. I think there are younger players that could help the team. Looking at the MLS top 10 goal scorers in the league, all of them are under the age of 30, with the top four of the top five being under the age or 25 and younger. So that gives you a pretty good indication that you want, excuse me, you want the man leading your line to be, young and fit and fresh. And while Gonzalo's been good coming off the bench or playing, 60, 70 minutes, excuse me, I need some water. Playing 60 minutes, I don't think, signing him to a DP deal continually and, having him start and, having, another Kronz situation, I guess, when you bring in a young striker and then you still have Gonzalo there just taking up his minutes, I don't think it'll be wise. But if there's a possibility to restructure that club option, I don't know if, unless you can do that in there when you sign an initial contract and there's an option. I think maybe is it possible to restructure it? I don't know, but if it's a
Yeah,
DP
so
deal, I think it's bad.
his deal is up, and I don't believe he has the service time to be a free agent. They lowered it this past year,
Yeah,
so I still don't think that I think he would miss it by a year. So you definitely could bring him back maybe on like a 1 year deal that would be TAM level. I think it possibly
it have to
could.
be
Now you're
Tam.
getting into he can't. He'd need to take a significant pay cut. We're
Yeah.
talking, millions of dollars to make
Yep.
that happen. So it's asking a lot, right? And there's where you sort of box yourself into a corner. For those people that you were mentioning who are saying, well, he's now earned, obviously a new contract. I think it's a little more complicated than that, simply
Yeah.
because of the designation that he takes up. This isn't, regular. If
Yeah.
this was Europe without a salary cap, without these roster construction
Well,
rules,
then,
I
yeah, of
think it's an
course.
easier right. I think it's an
Yeah.
easier case to make. But I think taking up a designated player spot still, I don't know if the fitness level would even warrant that. So,
Yeah. You're completely right. Yeah.
and of course, 7 goals is wonderful. When 3 of them are from penalties, that's padded a little, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's not taking anything away from Gonzalo, who really has been nice. I mean, let's be honest. I'll include myself in this. I had written him off. I didn't think that it made sense. I thought that the team played worse with him, especially in those dog days of summer, June, July, when he was on the pitch.
Yeah.
It was rather frustrating. So I'm happy that for him that he's been able to prove me wrong, prove a lot of us wrong. But whether or not that warrants a designated player, you only get 3 of them, and Inter Miami has really mismanaged their designated players a lot. You're
Yeah.
seeing now, like I said, you're seeing now what happens when you have a designated player that is producing, and so that golden ticket of a designated player, really, for me, you'd need to be like 5-10 years younger and worth that 25, 30 games and 10, 15 goals a season. And I just don't see it happening with an aging Gonzalo, because next year, let's be honest, that's how father time works. He's going to be older than he is this year, and he's older now than he was last year. So
Yep.
that to me is really easy with the Gonzalo situation.
Yeah. And adding on to that, he will be 35 heading into the next season. So this MLS is a young league. You don't want to, unless you're a Maxi Morales type, just in, yeah, you don't want to hinge your main DPs on guys who are 35 plus. So
In that same regard, though, Phil announcing he will start against San Jose. Now that makes it, to my recollection, the first time he started back to back, including a midweek, so like a weekend game and a midweek, for him, which will certainly be a test not only for his form, not only for his run of play, but also for his fitness. They're going to need goals against San Jose. This San Jose game could wind up being very similar looking to that Cincinnati game. 4-4-4-3 is not out of the question when they play San Jose. So I wonder, maybe in that regard, that's the thought. Initial reaction to announcing that he's going to start Campana come off the bench. We've seen Phil okey-doke this before. He had said that he would have listed Campana and Lassiter as doubtful for the Cincinnati game. Both wound up playing.
Yeah.
So I think that Phil has a tendency to play with this a little bit, and perhaps this is one of those. Because I was frankly a little surprised to hear him say Gonzalo would start, given his fitness level and given Campana now appearing to be ready to come back into the fold.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think he's just going with the hot hand. Like when Campana was scoring, he stuck with him. Now Gonzalo's scoring. Regardless of tactical setup, he'll just go with a player that's in best form, which can be good, but maybe not for the best for the team at the moment. So we'll see against San Jose if that works out. But yeah, it's a interesting decision. Campana did travel with the team if you check his social media. So we will see how that goes, and it's a must-win game. So
last thing on Higuain and I really wanted to get into the style of play, how he affects the rest of the components around him, because it does change when you have a player that likes to drop in a little more, that demands a little bit more of a structural based offense, and also one that maybe that affects defensively your pressure situation. Inter Miami pressed a lot more. We had talked about a post game that they pressed a lot more against Cincinnati and against New York City. I think it makes a little more sense why they did it against New York City with the confined space that they had. But you definitely saw with Higuain at that central striker position that they were willing to press more. I think that maybe that's because he drops in so far that unless you send those wingers up to press, you're really just conceding altogether everything that's going on there. Against San Jose, and now when we are bringing up fitness of Higuain, we are bringing up the fact of how many games you're playing in such a short amount of time. Where does the press stand? Phil has been reluctant to do so at the time. It's sort of like a half press. Sometimes, maybe not. Do we feel like we want to run? Maybe not. Is the weather, cooperating? Maybe it is. Like it seems very timid at best. Doesn't seem like it comes naturally to them. But I think it's something that both of us really would like them to see, or at least attempt it.
yeah, and I've spoken about this before, how they should implement some sort of press. Every MLS team has some sort of press, and the ones who are don't win possession in the final third, most of the time they're at the bottom of the league when it comes to the standings. So yeah, it would be. I'm looking up the stats now. It would be advisable for them to do something like that, because modern day soccer, especially in MLS, pressing can be a tactic. It's not. MLS is not a league where it's technically good as some others. So you press a center back, 9 times out of 10, unless it's like an Aaron Long or Walker Zimmerman, they can't really play through you. So yeah, possession one in the final third. It's New York Red Bulls, DC United, LA, FC Cincinnati, Chicago, Sporting. So a couple of those teams in the top five are in playoff positions, but a couple of them are struggling this year. New York City is number 7, then you have Toronto, Philly. These are all teams that are looking to get into playoff places, that win possession in the final third. Of course, it's not hard and fast rule, but more often than not, if you press high up the field, you win the ball higher up the field. That means you get more chances on offense. So it would be it would be interesting to see Miami implement some sort of press, maybe with pressing triggers or something. Maybe not a full field press, but let's say the goalkeeper has it, they press the center backs, and that can be considered a press. But Miami is they're so content to just concede the ball to their opponent that like one of the Cincinnati goals was a perfect example of that, where they just didn't press and they invited in pressure, and that lets teams build a rhythm, and eventually they got scored on. So yeah, they definitely need to look into changing that.
That also brings me into this San Jose game coming up Wednesday night, uh, into Miami on the West Coast. So burning the midnight oil. For
Yeah.
we've done it with rain delays a lot this year. This will be another one of those because of the time zone change. But Inter Miami travels over to San Jose, and again the last time this year that they'll play a Western Conference opponent, they've had actually some success. Let's remove Austin from the equation, that game early in the year. But outside of that, wins against Portland, win against Seattle. So they're traveling out there, and as we talk about the press, Phil has made it clear that now that all seven attackers are really in the mix, that he's going to want to rotate through. So as I mentioned, those seven attackers, I'm talking about Taylor, Pozuelo, Indy, Higuain, Campana, Lassiter, Emerson, and now you can even throw Coco in there, right? So you have eight really on the docket there. The only one of that didn't get action, I believe, was Emerson
Yeah.
in the last game. So all of those guys played. Phil had talked about managing minutes for Pozuelo, of course, still trying to get fit. Coco still trying to get fit. He was hanging out in a Parisian hotel for a couple weeks ago. So gonna need to rotate through there. Of those, how would you like to see that managed? Higuain started against Cincinnati. It said that he'll start again. Taylor, you'd expect, would start as well. Indy, maybe a game to be desired last time out. Where would you see it in terms of starting out against San Jose?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I could see Emerson starting Vasilev. I don't know. I think Vasilev will start maybe. Phil likes him for his just doggedness and ability to just dribble, even though maybe the end product isn't quite there. Then maybe he'll shift into Emerson, and maybe Quarantine John will get some minutes, and I can see Campana coming on in like the 70th minute if Gonzalo's gassed and the score is still 0-0. Yeah, anything can happen, really. I think Phil will be prepared to do anything like he did against Cincinnati. So
Well, the
yeah, I
other
think
thing too is you could start Lassiter. He did show that he was healthy. He did make a difference.
mhm.
I thought in his short appearance
A
against
little rusty
Cincinnati.
though. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, he was a little rusty, but
Yeah,
his
of
his
course.
yeah,
It's to be expected, I think, but nice to see him out there. I think that he absolutely should start one of the two games.
yeah, I agree.
If you want to hold it back a little more, I guess I understand that. But in terms of those attackers, it really will get a sense of where the pecking order is, I think, with all of this. You have a myriad of options there, but it's almost like a master of none in that each one of the guys gives you something a little different. So pick which matchup you're going to want the most. And in terms of, you mentioned riding the hot hand of Higuain, maybe you ride the hot hand with Robert Taylor right now. I think that makes obviously sense. And then you sort of mix and match what's working for you with the other ones.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, especially the way San Jose they play. I think at the end of the day, I think Miami just need to go out and win. There isn't, if ands or who plays who. If it's Gonzalo in form, he needs to end up, being that goal scorer. If it's Capone off the bench, it needs to be that goal scorer. He needs to be that goal scorer. San Jose also play a 4-3-3, and they've got dangerous players, Abobasi, Jackson Newell, who is I know he's a bit of a meme, but he can be good on his day. And of course, Kate Cowell off the bench as well. So Yeah, just they can be a dangerous team. And their last game, they drew 2-2 away. I believe they were at home, or maybe it was away, but they drew to the Real Salt Lake, who are a good team in the West. I think they're fifth right now. So, yeah, it all depends really. At the end of the day, they need to win, and yeah, and yeah, there's nothing to add really. They just need to get 3 points.
And San Jose is a team that has struggled to play defense lately too. We mentioned that pre Cincinnati, and we mentioned that obviously the 4-4, but looking at the Quakes, they haven't had a clean sheet since a scoreless draw against Nashville on June 11th. So it's been quite a while since they've not allowed a goal. I wonder then if you do keep Pozuelo or if you consider Bryce Duke. We had mentioned the idea that Phil had wanted to rotate, not burn Pozuelo out too soon. Bryce Duke hasn't played a full 90 since the Barcelona match, actually. So maybe he'll be an option there. I wonder if that fits with Higuain as much. It seems like you had mentioned earlier that the natural number 10. It would seem to me that Pozuelo would be a better fit for Higuain than Bryce Duke would be.
Yes, I agree. I think Duke, while he's a really good player, I think Pozuelo just brings that extra umph. He's a DP caliber player, so well, Duke will get his chances. At the rest, Pozuelo can't play every game, so Duke will get his chances, and he's still young, and we've seen what he can do. So, honestly, there's some games where I kind of want to see him start for Jean Mata. That would be interesting to see him play as an
I completely agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we'll just have to see. I think maybe this could be a game where Duke does start as a winger, but it's sort of like a central midfielder winger where he just is out there, but he's combining with Pozuelo. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. And yeah, I think he'll definitely get some minutes with not only this game but the Montreal game as well.
So you mentioned the Montreal game as well. Two big games coming up this week for Inter Miami. And as we've been talking about them trying to stay in this playoff mix, now you sort of have to scoreboard watch as well. It can't just be about Inter Miami getting results. They're going to need some help throughout this process. They got some help a couple of weeks ago in the fact that when they lost to New York City, no one had taken advantage and really won as well. They got help again this past week with the draw against Cincinnati, which almost makes the Cincinnati draw a little more infuriating, that you could have really made an impact in this race. Cincinnati obviously drawing, that means that they only get 1 point out of it. Chicago and Atlanta both drew 0-0. You look down in Charlotte and Columbus, they wound up getting postponed. They'll play that game later. New England and Toronto drew 0-0. DC United came back to beat Orlando, so they're still in the mix with Inter Miami having a game left against Orlando at home, mind you. They have 2 games left against the Crew, 2 games left against Toronto. So they got a game against Chicago. They've got a game against DC, say a game against Montreal. There are games down the stretch here, or 2 against Montreal, I think, right? Because they closed the year that way over there. So
Yeah.
this really opens up the scoreboard watching, and with these midweek games, you also, I guess, as you're getting ready for the San Jose game, Charlotte and DC play, Columbus and Montreal play in those early sets of games. At this point, you're really rooting for draws anytime two playoff rivals are playing against each other. And then if they're playing against someone else, maybe one of the top teams in the East or against a Western Conference team, you're rooting for a loss there. So that's really it. But you look at 5 through almost down to DC with a win over Orlando, separated by only like 9 points. So things are really tightening up here in the East. And Inter Miami is going to determine whether or not they stay in the mix one way or the other.
Yeah, and yeah, this is where those early losses against Cincinnati and some of those losses that could have been draws are going to come back to bite Miami in the behind, like the 2-0 loss to New England, 1-0 loss to Charlotte. The 2-0 loss to Atlanta, even though the two teams split those games. going to come back to bite them, especially if some of those teams go on a run. And, especially that Charlotte game, even though Miami did beat them 3-2, I think, unless the tiebreakers are on wins, right? So,
The first tiebreaker is win. So, and
yeah,
that continues to go in Miami's favor against a lot of these teams.
which is, it's good compared to last season. They did not have that. So, yeah, and they still haven't played Toronto yet this season either. So, and they play New York again, and then excuse me, they played Montreal last game. They played Columbus. So some of these teams that they are directly fighting for playoff spots, they've not played yet. So it's a big deal. They could get some serious points here and some tiebreakers. So any going back to the San Jose game, any points that you can get against the West Coast side, they're free points. If you lose against them, you're not dropping up and down the standings, but but if you win against them, you get points off of a West Coast team that you're not going to see until I guess a Must Cup if you make it there. So yeah, it's just a good opportunity to get some points for Miami, and they should absolutely take advantage of that. Especially the San Jose side, that's iffy. Montreal, I don't know, but
at this point in the year, you have to look at every match as dropped points, not points
yeah,
gained anymore. It's points dropped, especially with wins being the tiebreaker. You need to get those wins. So any draw is still dropped points. And I think that's the mentality that fans and this team especially need to have.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, at the end of the day, they just need to start winning.
Alex, moving on from San Jose, the team will head to Montreal at the weekend, and a really interesting schedule that they're going to have to deal with. They traveled out to the West Coast. They'll train at the Quakes training facility Tuesday. The game, obviously, on Wednesday. Then they're not returning back to South Florida, which is what normally they would do if they're on the East Coast, I guess. But instead, they're going to go straight to Montreal. They'll then train on Friday at Montreal. I still keep wanting to call them the Impact. They haven't been the Impact for years, but they'll train at Montreal's training facility before the game on Saturday and head back. So a very long week of travel for them coming up, and especially with a lot of games in a short amount of time. How do you think that might impact where this team is performing? Some tired legs, maybe a team that doesn't really get off to a lot of hot starts as well.
Yeah, I think it'll affect them a little, especially a lot of these guys have come in from other leagues, Robert Taylor, McVay, Damian Lowe, even though he's played in MLS. The travel will hurt them. I know some of the other guys like Lassiter, Higuain, who's been in the league for a couple of years. I think it'll be difficult to not only the time zones, but flying from halfway across the country in different countries. It'll definitely affect them. I think at this point, Inter Miami just needs to minimize that risk, and the physios and medical staff are going to have to do the best to get these guys the most comfortable that they can, and make sure they're getting their sleep and hydrated and whatnot. And yeah, I do think it'll affect them though.
It is always tough. We always like to say that they're professionals, they should be able to handle it. But any of us that have ever been on a plane ride for that long before, right? The flight from Miami to San Jose is it almost takes a day, and then the flight from San Jose to Montreal almost takes a day, and you think of the time zone differences. You're going back 3 hours and you're going forward 3 hours. You're playing at 10:30, then you're playing at 7, right? Like it's all over the place. I definitely think that for a team, you mentioned it'll affect them a little. Where you always immediately look to is who are like the older guys and who are the guys that have played day in and day out, right? So you're not just your Gonzalo Higuains, but also Yedlin has played almost every single minute of this season. Christopher McVay has played every minute of this season. And now as we're down to the latter third, that really tends to affect how your body is going to react to things like this. And that's why when we talk about those attackers and rotating minutes, sometimes it's not just fitness in terms of how you're able to play on the field, but also just how you're feeling waking up in the morning, right? You got to, and the thing that I give credit for is Miami, and this is where they picked up a lot of points. They're more fit than pretty much most of the time when they head out onto the field. They're the more fit team. So you give them a lot of credit in that regard. I just guess I wonder how much that'll hold up in an extended travel like this.
Yeah, it'll be difficult, but I think Inter Miami have some really good backroom staff and medical professionals with them this season. So I think they'll be okay. They'll be okay.
The other thing that you have to think about when traveling to Montreal for the first time, remember those games were played at Montreal during COVID. The Montreal away games were played. Well, one was here, but Montreal away was played at New York Red Bulls,
Yeah,
and they played Toronto at in Hartford for one game, but they did play away at Toronto. Now Canada does have these COVID restrictions that if you were unvaccinated, you would not be able to play. We
yeah,
reached out for a comment with the team to see if any players would fall under their designation. The team declined to comment. So, no
mm,
word if anybody will be missing out on the game. You can look back to that Toronto FC game last year away at BMO Field as a reference point. Gregory played in that game. Breck Shea played in that game. Indy Vasilev played in that game. And as far as like guys that were still on the roster, you look at Drake was the number 3 keeper at the time, so you can't really look towards that. Gonzalo was sort of I don't know, not really in the mix there. So there are some guys that you can look back on and say, okay, who's going to be playing and who's not. Gonzalo would probably be the first name that I would consider. And perhaps him, I don't want to go full conspiracy theory, but playing on Wednesday, there are those travel restrictions. The team is not going to release who will make the travel, who will not, and for what reason. So anything of who's there and who's not is pure speculation. I want to be clear on that.
yeah.
But it will come into play. Teams have at times had to deal with this when playing north of the border, and Inter Miami will be no different. This is the first time they'll return to Canada later on in the season to play at Toronto FC. So every team has to deal with it. Miami's no different, but definitely something that will come into play.
Yeah, and I think well, I guess we'll see once they head over to Montreal. Hopefully it doesn't, I think, well, from the guys last year, I think all of them were vaccinated. So, but there's a lot of new players this season, so we'll just have to see.
And the team does have a very good policy on that too. So want to extend them the courtesy, the olive branch. They are extremely vigilant on how they handle these situations, and they've done a really good job. They deserve the commendation. They deserve the applause for how they've handled all of this situation, both in front of our eyes and behind the scenes. I think that the way they've handled it has been really well done. Finally, I really want to get to Inter Miami too, who's in their own playoff race going on right now in a very heated, tight race in MLS Next Pro's Eastern Conference, right there with a lot of teams and a nice come from behind win. The first time Inter Miami 2 have gotten one of those penalty wins this year that have been eluding them. They probably would be much more comfortable in the playoff race had they been able to get some penalty wins under their belt. They come from behind. They earn the draw against FC Cincy and in MLS Next Pro that goes straight to penalties. They were down actually in that penalty shootout before CJ Dos Santos came up big to give them the extra point in that. They sit just a point behind Toronto and New England for that final playoff spot, and they will play at home at Drive Pink Stadium Sunday at 7:00 against New England. This is the biggest game that they played this year. And with Toronto, they drop that game. Inter Miami will jump both teams and be into the final playoff spot. And 2 and 3 with New York City and Rochester is really up for grabs right now as well. There's 7 games left in their season. A team that has the longest unbeaten streak in all of MLS Next Pro right now at 5. They're unbeaten in their last 5. They've gained a lot of points, really shot up the table lately. So just a huge opportunity for them coming up this weekend, Alex.
Yeah, I think they need to take their chances as well. I think Inter Miami CF2, they've been on a good run of form. A lot of good players in that squad. Tyler Bagley, Romeo Beckham's doing really well despite the media narrative about him. Harvey Neville's doing really well. Abel Caputo, all those guys down there.
Borgelin.
Yeah, Schneider Borgelin as well. Benjamin Kremeshki, I think he was called up to the All Star game. Several Inter Miami two players were called up to the All
There's
Star
three of
game.
them. Yeah, three.
Yeah, really impressive by them. Yeah, Cedro dos Santos is doing well. Yeah, just yeah, it's just the MLS Next Pro playoff thing is really interesting because it's the first time it's ever being done. So there's still a lot of new things out there. But yeah, Inter Miami CF2 are looking good. Darren Powell's doing a really good job with them. So looking forward to see how they get on.
And Javi Morales, the academy coach, also heading to coach for the MLS Next Pro All Star Game. So a very very promising future for them. And as they go again, 7 o'clock Sunday night. It is at Drive Pink Stadium, so you can go to these games. And really a great opportunity for them, and perhaps their biggest test of the season if they want to make this playoff run. The U15s won it all. Inter Miami's trying to make a playoff run here, and maybe right in the middle, into the Heronitos have a chance to make some noise as well. Mm-hmm. Alex, it will be a busy week for sure. San Jose on Wednesday, Montreal on Saturday. All the action right here on the Heron Outlet. You can check out our YouTube page, on Instagram, on Twitter. Follow, share, like, subscribe, and all that fun, good stuff. For Alex Winley, for Austin Robillard, who will join us here, and for our producer Andres, I'm Ian Hess, and we'll see you at the games.